Hey everybody, welcome back to the Badgerland Birding Podcast, bringing you birding news and stories from the Badger State and beyond. Today, Ryan and I are going to talk about the first pelagic trip that we ever did out of Westport, Washington. And we're going to be making some videos about it, but we thought we'd give everybody a little sneak peek first.
Yeah, I'm really excited to make the videos about it. I've been looking at the stuff that we got. I don't actually have all the footage yet because I still have to upload some stuff from Derek's camera, but it was quite the experience, and we got a lot of lifers on that trip. So we're trying to showcase what it's like to be on a pelagic and specifically that Westport pelagic. So I think that it's going to be really exciting for everyone to see what it's actually like instead of just hearing about it.
Yeah, I couldn't really find a ton of good materials to watch as far as what a pelagic was like, so I'm excited to kind of provide that. And it was a unique experience that I feel like every birder should have at some point, whether it's doing the pelagic out of Washington, or I know there's some in California or even the East Coast. It was super cool.
Yeah, I'm calling it a bucket list item for birders, and I do agree that it is something you need to do at least once. Having done it, I thought it was really cool. I don't feel like I need to do it again in the immediate future. I
I
would
do.
definitely do it again. I'm just saying I don't think I need to do it again, next week. It's something that it takes up an entire day pretty much. And you kind of have to be in the specific mood for it. If you're in it and you want to grind that day, it's great. I think if you showed up kind of like, yeah, I don't think you'd have as good a time because it's a long time and you're out there the
I
whole
think
day.
that I'm gonna quit terrestrial birding and I'm only gonna do pelagic
I thought
birding.
you were gonna say you were gonna do extraterrestrial birding.
That'd be something. That'd be something.
That's bold.
Yeah.
Undiscovered species out there in space.
Yeah, but let's start with kind of the first from the beginning of the pelagic. The Westport trips fill up really early. So we had booked this thing a while in advance. So if you want to go on one of these trips, you will probably want to book it well in advance and look at their schedule and how they process payments and what they all require and all that. So we had this plan for a while. And then the day before, we ended up staying in Washington with some friends of ours. And we were pretty concerned about getting seasick because from everything that I'd heard is if you get seasick, it kind of ruins the whole experience and it's hard to kind of stop it once that you are seasick. And so a big thing was trying to decide like, do you take Dramamine the day before? Because some people said just take it the night before. And then I think it was like take another one in the morning or something. I don't know. Don't quote me on that because I don't remember what it was. But I heard Dramamine kind of will knock you out where you'll feel really groggy. And I didn't really want to do that. So we ended up doing like the little patch you can put on like behind your ear. So we did that the night before. And then we just wore it, took it off a couple hours after the trip was over. And I feel like that worked really well. I normally don't get seasick, so I don't know if it was that or it was just I wasn't going to get seasick, but you didn't get seasick. So that was good. I was more worried about
I
you.
know. I think before we talk about that, well, you talked a lot about it already, but we need to talk about how badly you wanted to do the pelagic because there was so long years where you just kept saying, I want to do a pelagic. I really want to do a pelagic. We have to find a way to do a pelagic. It was whenever we talked about things we wanted to do on the checklist, we got to do a pelagic.
I'm
I
an
just signed
ocean
us up for
guy.
a
What can
pelagic.
I
I'm
say?
pretty sure that when this happened, you basically just said, I signed us up for a pelagic. We're going to do it in Washington on
I
this
don't
date.
think that that's how
I
it
think
went.
that's how it went. That's how
No,
I
it's not.
remember it. But yes, the seasickness patches either worked or were just not prone to seasickness. We've been on boats before. We've been on Lake Michigan before. We've been on these smaller lakes before, and we've never had seasickness issues. So I don't know if we're very prone to it. There was only one time the entire day that I felt a little bit potentially seasick, and it was actually in the cabin because when you go in the cabin of the boat, then you kind of lose track of everything. You just feel the up and down motion on the ocean, which is a
Yeah.
great run. But if you're out there on the deck and you see the horizon and you see that you're going up and down, it kind of just makes it so that you don't even think about it. It just feels natural. Whereas if you're in the cabin and you lose sight of the horizon, all of a sudden that seasickness feeling kind of came up a little bit. But that was really it.
Yeah, and I've been on the ocean before and I've been on dive boats and things. I've never really had a problem with it, but our friend who we were with, he was pretty worried about getting seasick, and I feel like the patch definitely helped him. So I don't know.
He
I would
was
say
the least seasick person on the entire trip. He was the first person to go to the front of the boat. He was just all over the place. So he did not have any seasickness at all. But there were some people that did, and you could see
Yeah.
them, unfortunately, and they looked very unhappy. And somebody that you knew definitely had some seasickness issues, and she didn't seem like she was operating at 100%, which is too bad because there were so many cool things to see out there that it would definitely be a major bummer if you were feeling bad the entire trip.
Yeah, I think it's better to take precaution than to end up seasick and kind of feel like your whole trip is ruined. But to set the scene, we had to get there really early. So I think it was like 5:40 was when there was like a meeting. So we were up bright and early, met on the boat, and it was a decently sized boat. I don't even know how big you would call it, but as far as like size of the boat, but
We had a lot of people
pretty
on that boat,
sizable
though.
vessel. Yeah, probably like what was it, like 20 people maybe?
It's probably, yeah, with the crew as well, probably 15 to 20 people.
Yeah, and it had, the back of it was pretty open, so there was seating there, and then there was the cabin, and then there was the front part of the boat. And so they kind of gave us the speech before we went out of what we were kind of to expect, what we were expecting to see. And they did mention that a lot of the gulls there in Washington are the hybrids of I believe it's
The
glaucous winged and
Western Gull and
western,
Caucasus
and
Wing
they just
Gull.
called them big guys, which I thought was funny. So like if
It
you
was
hear
in
us
that
say there's some big
zone
guys
where they
out there.
interbreed. So they said, unfortunately, we're in the zone where they interbreed. And those are some big gulls.
They're
And we
big
saw
guys.
one try to eat a black turnstone last year. Just
Yeah,
had it by the wing in its mouth, really wanted to eat it, but the turnstone got away. So those are some mangy looking large gulls out there.
for sure. And so we they made note that we're gonna see um shearwater, sooty shearwaters, pink-footed shearwaters. So kind of as you go out, you start to see more of the unique pelagic things. They're like, if your first glimpse is seeing one fly away, don't worry, we'll see more. Which I was glad they said that, because if they shouted one out, I would definitely be like, that might be the only one we ever see. And you never know, but I like that they kind of went over some of that stuff. And for the first part, we were all in the back. And so it was, you're
It
going through
seemed
kind of the
cramped at
choppy
first.
water.
At
At
first, when
first,
we were all
yeah.
on the back, I was kind of thinking, I don't know how this is going to go. It was really cold in the morning, too. I wore layers out there, so I wore a winter coat, actually, and then I put some waterproof clothing over the top of it. So definitely dress in layers because it's going to be chilly in the morning, and then it might heat up later in the day. It never really got that hot, so I never actually took off any layers, but it was good to have the option to do so. But the back of the boat seemed cramped at first, but then as everybody started dispersing around the boat, it seemed like the boat was a lot more open. And it is worth mentioning that that boat did have a bathroom on board, which was great. And then it also had clean drinking water. I mean, I would always suggest bringing your own water just to be on the safe side because I don't know if every boat has that. And then they also got donuts for us, which was nice.
And I believe it was the captain's wife came and brought ginger snaps, which
Yep.
ginger is supposed to help with seasickness. That was a
She's
nice
actually
little
the
perk.
first mate too, which in
Oh,
and of itself
perfect.
is kind of a pun.
So yeah, my friend Patrick was like, make sure you dress in a bunch of layers because it's going to be cold, which makes sense because you're out on the water. And then they did send a little sheet of, how to dress and all that stuff. So I felt like we were pretty prepared from that standpoint. And then as we got further out, they had the spotters, so the different people on the boat that
Very
would look for different
knowledgeable.
things. Yeah, they were very knowledgeable. And we ended up, they said, okay, you can go to the front of the boat. So, like, me, you, and our friend John, we all ended up at the front, which I feel like was the best place to be because as you're kind of approaching birds, you have a good point of view. And then we were also by one of the spotters, Bruce, who was like super knowledgeable. So I felt like it's good to be by one of the spotters because they're going to be helping you find things. And then I also had the OM1 Mark II camera with me with the 150 to 600 millimeter lens. So I was snapping pictures. And I feel like the pictures actually came in kind of clutch because a couple times they were like, oh, did anyone get a good view of that? And I would have the picture and then we could ID it from the picture. So I feel like that actually helped a ton.
Yes, that is very true. We were kind of the intrepid people that went up to the boat first. And I think a lot of it was because of John, actually. John was really pushing the envelope. When they were like, you can go to the side of the boat, John went to the side of the boat. And when they said, you can go to the front of the boat, John was just gone. You know, he was to the front of the boat. So he really wanted to be up there. And I do think it was the best place to be. It was actually drastically different conditions than the back of the boat. Up in the front, you were getting the brunt of the wind hitting the boat first. And in the back, it was actually a lot warmer. So if somebody was having issues with being cold, I think the back of the boat would actually be the best place to be. But I liked our location. We got that breeze coming through. We were actually kind of sitting on the front part of it, which was funny. So we had a little seat there that we could sit down on. And we would kind of intermittently stand up, sit down, all that stuff. But Bruce was awesome. I really liked hearing his stories. He's been doing Westport since 1991, I think. And before that, he
Wow.
was in California doing shearwater tours also. So he had tons of experience and he was great at pointing stuff out. He told us stories. He pointed out other species of animals that were out there that weren't even birds. So I really enjoyed hearing everything that he had to say.
Yeah, and it's worth noting there was a part, the front of the boat was like covered with black tape, and they were like, you can go up to the front, but don't go in the part where there's black tape because the captain needs to see, and you don't want to block him because apparently the week before, like a couple weeks before, they hit an ocean sunfish, the massive sunfish species, and so that cost like a bunch of money and damages that they had to repair. Which I have a lot of questions about that. But in addition to the birds, we got to see the ocean sunfish hanging out on the top of the water. We did not run one over, thankfully. But that was probably one of my favorite things was honestly seeing the ocean sunfish and some of the other whales and mammals and stuff like that. And blue sharks you would sometimes see on the top of the water as well.
I think ocean sunfish were weirder than I thought they would be. They look like a child's rendition of what a fish would look like. If a child drew a fish, it would probably end up being a giant ocean sunfish, but they kind of just float around on the surface of the ocean. And you actually see their pectoral fins sometimes just waving out of the water. So you would just see this disturbance on the surface, and it was an ocean sunfish. And we saw some big ones, we saw some little ones. That was really interesting. There were sea lions out there that we saw. Those were goofy. Humpback whale was cool. Some different porpoise species. The blue sharks, as you mentioned. So there was a lot of other cool wildlife out there that wasn't just birds. But of course, the bird life out there was what we came to see, and that was very cool too.
Yeah, the first lifer we got out there was the sooty shearwater,
Well,
which
John
of
got rhino
course,
auklet.
oh
First
yeah,
thing that he got was rhino
that's
auklet.
good. We did have a ton of rhinoceros auklets, and we spent a lot of time the previous year when we were in that region trying to see them from land, and it was so much easier from the boat. Like the views were so much better, but it was really tough to take media because you are bobbing up and down, and it favored photo over video, although we tried to do both.
Yeah, it was really an impossible task because you're going up and down, the waves are going up and down. It was actually a little bit easier when stuff was in flight for some reason, but if I wanted to get a clear, non-shaky, non-wavy video of anything, I had to be zoomed way out to the point where you couldn't even see the bird. So I tried my best, but I did not get a lot of good stuff, which is regrettable because it's going to make it tough to translate on the
I
videos, but
think
I
the
did my
viewers will
best.
understand the shaky, how shaky it is
It's
out there.
harder than you would even think. If you think about it, you think, okay, well, I can figure this out. But as you're moving up, you're having to try to move the camera down, and then the bird is going up. So you're really just trying to somehow
You're
adjust to
basically
keep in
being
the same place.
trying to be a stabilizer, but you don't really know where the wave is going to push you and move
Right.
you.
Yeah, exactly. So it would be sudden jerks too. So you would just jerk up and jerk down because of the waves that you were hitting. It just, there was no method to the madness of how you were moving. So even thinking about it now, I'm like, oh, I probably could have done, things better, different, but maybe if I had a different camera, a different stabilization, but it was really challenging. And we've even tried to do that from canoes before in much more calm water, and it's still challenging.
Yeah. But so John got the rhinoceros auklet, which was cool to see those a little more up close. But Sooty Shearwater was the first one we got, and of course that's mentioned in the big years. It's always exciting to get a bird that's mentioned in the movie that basically made us start birding in the first place. They were really fascinating to watch and just the way they fly. And something one of the spotters said that was interesting about the shearwaters is from a distance, it's not the way they look, but it's more the way they behave that kind of tells them that there's a different type. And so a lot of it is kind of the behavior of these birds. and we were cruising out towards like the deep water canyons because that's where a lot of the birds hang out. So as we were going, we saw a lot of sooty shearwaters. We got pink-footed shearwaters, and then the storm petrels were actually way cooler than I thought because they're kind of just like the nighthawks and the swallows of the ocean where they'll fly around and pick stuff off the surface, and they're these really tiny little birds,
Yeah, I really like the pretzels.
the
I
storm
really like
pretzels.
I really like the storm petrels a lot. They were really neat to see and unique compared to the larger shearwaters that we saw out there. The shearwaters were really cool. Sooty, as you mentioned, was a neat species, but those storm petrels, you would just see them fluttering on the top of the water. Really unique looking bird. Very cool. And then we also had Jaegers. We got a Jaeger slam.
Yeah,
We
yeah, it
got
was great.
Pomeranian, long-tailed, and parasitic, which was cool.
And
Sabin's gull.
South
Sabin's
Polar
gull was
Skua.
really cool. The South Polar Skua was one of my
Those were,
favorites.
yeah.
And Bruce said that they are bad news. He said they are monsters out there. They're the ones that will eat penguin chicks. So they're just a nightmare for other birds to deal with. But they were really cool. They had a nice color pattern to them.
Yeah, yeah. So we were seeing a bunch of cool stuff. There were a few times when people did see things that we didn't see, unfortunately.
Or
Red
did they?
phalarope, apparent we got news someone in the back of the boat saw two like way far away. Was hoping we'd see more, but we never did. We only had rednecked and then Arctic tern, someone apparently spotted, but they were like, yeah, it's the tiny dot way back. And I was like, I don't see anything. And we never saw another one. So unfortunate when you do miss a couple of those things that never come back around, but I feel like we got a good bulk of the cool stuff. The big one we haven't even mentioned yet is the black-footed albatross. Those were incredible. Really fun to photograph too.
Yes, and probably our greatest success in terms of finding birds was when we encountered shrimp boats. So when the shrimp boats were out there, the birds were gathering around the shrimp boats because it was a free meal because they'd haul the shrimp up. Some shrimp would get out of the nets and the birds would come pick it off. And so the birds loved the shrimp boats, and that's where we probably got the most species diversity. We got a northern
Definitely.
fulmar in that area
Oh
too.
yeah, yeah.
And that was our first dalliance with the black-footed albatross, which just looks massive compared to everything else out there. A really cool species. You always hear albatross are huge, and that is the case. They are quite massive.
Yeah, so I think how it works is they go out to that deeper water area, and if there are shrimp boats, then it's great because the birds are gathered. So you would just hit these areas with, you'd just be surrounded by tons of these birds, and you'd hear like the pink-footed shearwaters made some like vocalizations, which were
Sounded like a
interesting.
child crying.
And then you would hear like the pitter-patter of their feet on the water of the different birds. We also had short-tailed shearwater, which was cool. We were looking for like other types of shearwaters, but we didn't really find it too much as in addition to the species we already mentioned. But so they look for the shrimp boats, and then we did stop and try to chum, which really didn't do anything. We like had it out, and they're like, okay, this isn't really doing anything. Let's go back by the shrimp boats. So we like went back there, and we ended up chumming a little bit by the shrimp boats, and then they killed the engine, and we were able to go back and get some media of like the albatross. There was a baby ocean sunfish out there, and I think some South Polar skua came by, and then there were some other birds flying around. So that was probably the best media opportunities because stuff came in pretty close. So that was probably like the best time for us to collect images and videos during
Yeah,
the trip.
absolutely. And much like everything else in nature, the abundance of birds is going to be driven by the food sources. So if there's food out there, the birds will be out there. Bruce was saying that there were times when just even going out to that shelf, they weren't seeing much of anything, so they knew there just wasn't much food there. So lucky enough for us, pretty much the whole way there and back, there were some birds to look at in different species, and we kind of collected lifers a couple at a time as we went out, which was cool. Where it wasn't just like, oh, there's 15 species that we haven't seen all in this one area right now. That would be a little overwhelming. And to a degree, it was like that near the shrimp boats, but a lot of times it was, okay, sooty shearwater. Okay, cool. 10 minutes later, pink-footed shearwater. Okay, cool. Fork-tailed storm petrel after that. It kind of trickled in, which actually made it a little nicer, made it continuously exciting.
Yeah, we got leeches, storm petrel was out there. Um, but it's just a whole different ecosystem, and you almost feel like you're relearning, the local species because once you're that far offshore, it's just a whole different community of birds. So it was kind of fun to learn a new ecosystem because you're in the United States, but it's completely different than anything you've seen. on shore, basically.
Yeah, and furthermore, those are birds that aren't nesting necessarily in the continental United States for most of them. Some of them are stuff that goes offshore, but South Polar skua is a bird that spends time in Antarctica, and the black-footed albatross, I believe, nests in Hawaii. So you're looking at stuff in that ocean that's from all across the globe, and that's what's so cool about it, is that you get this look into this alien ecosystem, and there's no structure of any kind out there. It's the open ocean. And you just have birds that are flying around in the open ocean. And yes, the shrimp boats provide some sort of structure, but these birds are just in the middle of the water. It's so cool. It's
Yeah,
so
there
unique.
there was a log that we found, and there was something on it. We're like, oh, is it Arctic tern? What is it? It was a pink-footed shearwater, which was really
Logs we
weird.
found out are very important though, because there's nothing out there to sit on. Any floating debris that's strong enough will probably house a bird. And if it does, it's worth seeing.
Yeah, and what was interesting too is while we were out on the Pelagic, we got news that I think it was further north in Washington, a whale watching boat, they had spotted a red-footed booby. So a bunch of people were like, "Oh man, that's so cool!" And I think it was refound, so people did get to see it. But we had a nice red-footed booby experience in California where we actually saw it from shore. So we weren't like super jealous because we had seen that species before. But you never know what might show up out there. So every Pelagic trip could be different. You could go on 3 trips in 3 days and you could find totally different species.
Yeah, precisely. So I felt like we did pretty well. And a lot of it was thanks to our spotters and thanks to the captain too, who knew where to go. There were some misses. I would have liked to have gotten Arctic tern. That would have been cool. Manx's shearwater was one that we had a possibility for that we didn't see. I would have liked a Laysan albatross, but that's a
Short-tailed
little more on.
albatross.
Short-tailed albatross is really rare out there. Laysan albatross is rare but
I
possible.
think they had some a couple days later, lace and
Ah,
albatross. I know, I
so.
know.
But we didn't get anything that was massively rare for the spotters. So, you can always tell if something's really rare if the people that are guiding you get super excited about it. And I think they were excited about a lot of the birds we saw, but there was no massive surprise, I would say.
Did I mention we saw Cassin's auklet too?
Little potato auklet.
Yeah, if we didn't, we saw that as well. But
I
I
like
feel
how
like
they just get a footnote, just, yeah, we went in some of those.
I mean, there was so much stuff. It's hard to make sure everything's included. But I feel like we got a good amount of the speed. Like we got a good amount of what you'd expect to find. Like there wasn't any, oh man, we always get this one and we didn't get it this time. Like my friend Patrick, when he went, they didn't get black-footed albatross, which is wild, but they got parakeet auklet. So so I feel like we had the things you expect to see we're all pretty much there. And we texted our friend Will, who we had on the podcast, I think it was last week, and he was like, "Oh man, you got South Polar skua, like no way." So there is stuff that, people do miss on other pelagics. So I feel like we
Yeah.
got a lot of the core species.
Yeah, I think so too. And it leaves you potentially wanting to go back there again to see what else you can get because you can get different things different times of the year. You can get things that are just radically wild for that area that don't belong there, but they're crossing the ocean. So there's a lot of variability to what you're going to get on a pelagic in terms of the species most of the time. And I think that's a really cool part of the adventure. And I really felt like it was an adventure. And it's one of those silly things with birding where you're just like, I'm out in the middle of the ocean on a boat trying to tail some shrimp boats to get a look at a short what was it? Short-tailed or short-billed?
Short-tailed albatross,
Yeah, short-tailed albatross or the shearwater.
Manx,
No, no, no.
flush-footed,
No, it was the rare one we got.
short-tailed shearwater.
Short-tailed shearwater. I'm out there in the middle of the water trying to get a look at a short-tailed shearwater. And then you realize what your life has turned into.
Well, people do that to whale watch too. I mean, we did some solid whale watching out there as well.
Yeah, and the whole time I have to say too, it reminded me so much of the Big Year. Someone on the Pelagic actually said that the Big Year boat was based off of that boat at the Pelagic we were on. So the kind of
Which is
structure and
pretty
everything.
cool. And it did seem kind of like that. I feel like in the big year, it seemed like it was maybe a little bit bigger. And then Annie Auklet from the big year was based on Captain Debbie Shearwater, who I believe is a captain out of California.
She loved those seabirds so much she had her name legally changed.
Annie Auklet at least. I don't know about Debbie Shearwater, but that'd be
I'm
cool if she
assuming
did.
her name was not originally Debbie
What if it was
Shearwater.
though? And she's just like, I have to captain
She
a
just
boat now.
followed the calling.
Uh, so somebody did say that in the big year, the pelagic really bothered them because when Stu gets sick, he goes in the cabin, which is actually the worst place to go because it'll make you more seasick. You want to be out in the open air. So they didn't like that. And then when Jack Black was like, "Oh, it's fine. I can hear all the birds by call," he was saying like most of the pelagic birds don't make a noise. So he would have actually missed a lot of them. So they actually had a lot to say about what was wrong in the big year from the pelagic perspective.
And it is funny because they go on pelagics a number of times in that. So,
They do,
Stu
yeah.
gets seasick on two different pelagics. And then there's that November pelagic on Thanksgiving where there's the Siberian storm. So pelagics play a big role in the big year. And it was cool to have that experience. And it was similar. And one thing too is they do shout when something is seen because the motor is loud and the waves are loud. So they'll just shout from the front of the boat, you know, pink footed sheer water left side, and 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock or 9 o'clock. So they'll shout just like in the movie when something's seen. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, overall, it's definitely like you said, a bucket list activity. And then we did a little inshore, but on the way in, we definitely didn't see as many new species. And we hit an area that they referred to as the Mur zone, where there's a lot of common murs or Mur, however you want to pronounce it.
I still don't know.
Um, and at that point, we were kind of like, okay, like that's most of what the new things we saw is probably done. We were keeping an eye out for marbled murrelet, which I never saw. Somebody put one on the checklist, not one of the spotters, so I would have loved to see that. And it's one of those times where it's like, dang, I wish they would have told everybody. But then we did a little inshore birding where there were some surf birds and black turnstones, and
Ruddy
then
turnstones.
ruddy turnstones. Somebody said they saw a wandering tattler, which we didn't see, but we actually ended up going back to the Westport area later and we got wandering
Well, that was
tattler.
funny because I think they were kind of wrapping it up at that point. So they probably wanted to get back at a certain time or something. So somebody shouts out, "Oh, there was a wandering tattler there. Oh, now it's behind these rocks." And then everyone was just kind of like, "Oh, okay, let's go." And you're like, "Why didn't they stop more?" And
Yeah,
so
I'm like,
everyone
I
could see
need
the
that for my
wandering
life
tattler.
vest.
Yeah, you're
What
like,
are we
that
doing?
would have been a lifer. What are they doing? Why didn't they stop? So that was kind of funny. And then we ended up, yeah, going back and seeing one. Well,
We
seeing
saw like
multiples.
yeah, a couple of them.
Yeah, and
But we
saw some good looks at black turnstones too, so that ended well for us.
yeah, I was glad we were able to get that because that would have been kind of sad because it's like it's right there like somewhere. So that was a nice kind of end to the Westport, Washington experience. But would
Yeah.
definitely recommend it for anyone who hasn't done one. And if you have done one, let us know how the experience was for you.
And do you keep doing them? And what's the next one we should do? Should we go California? Should we go East Coast? People sometimes ask too if we have ever done like a Lake Michigan pelagic. I think some people have tried it in the past. I don't think you would get that much different stuff out there. You might get some Jaegers depending on the time of the year and probably some rafts of sea ducks, but I don't think you would get anything too wild.
Yeah, well, the big thing with the Great Lakes is Jagerfest and Superior on well, on Lake Superior. It's at Wisconsin Point, and they look for Jaegers and Savins gulls. So maybe if you could go out there and take a boat, you would get some other things.
Yeah, I do have to say I really like the Sabins gulls. They
They
have
were
such
very
a unique
beautiful.
pattern on the back. Yeah, they're a really cool looking gull species, and you don't get to see them close really ever. We actually got some decent looks. You think you got some good pictures of one or
They're
two of
not
them,
bad.
didn't you?
Yeah,
Yeah, it was really nice you had that camera along because you did
it
capture
did
some
help out a
cool
lot.
stuff. Yeah, a lot of times the spotters actually would come back and say, "Hey, did you get a picture of that
Yeah.
one that we thought could have been a long-tailed Jaeger?" And then you'd be like, "Oh yeah, I have it right here." And they'd look at it and say, "Oh, yep, that's a long-tailed Jaeger. We can tell by this and this." And they were really good at teaching too. I didn't know anything about any of these species when I started the pelagic. I just looked at checklists and things like that. I really came in as a seabird novice. And I feel like I learned a good amount because they were so good at just sharing information. They were even going into detail about how to differentiate the different shearwater species, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. They did a great job. I thought it was a well-captained boat, and the crew was all really good. So
Didn't hit
would
anything.
we didn't hit any ocean sunfish, and for that I'm thankful. So
I
yeah,
don't know what it would have been like, but yeah, I'm glad that we didn't deal with that.
yeah, yeah.
I think
So
John had a good time. He got a lot of lifers. I think he probably got the most lifers out of the three of us. I think you probably got the second most lifers, and I think I got third most.
oh, because you had some of the Jaegers and Savensgull.
I had Salmonsgull and I had Parasitic Jaeger.
Yeah.
So
Let
you made
me
it out better than me, but that's okay.
let me see how many lifers I got.
What
Um,
was your favorite bird that you saw since we're talking about it?
on the pelagic.
No, just ever. Yes, on the pelagic.
It's so hard to pick. Let me look through the list.
One bird we didn't talk about because we both had it before is there was a lot of redneck phalaropes out there,
Yeah,
which you
it's
don't
true.
think of shorebirds as just hanging out in the middle of the ocean, but they were not only flying by, they would just sit on the water, which I thought was interesting. Because you think there's sharks out there and there's things that would want to grab one of those, and they were just chilling on the top of the water.
I got 13 lifers on the
That's pretty
pelagic,
good. So I probably wait, counting wandering tattler or no?
not counting. So with
Okay.
wandering, it's 14.
So I
And
probably got 12 with wandering.
they did a good job getting the checklists like all completed. It took a couple days to finally get them, but they have them for different regions. So it's like Westport Pelagic inshore, Western Pelagic offshore, Gray's Canyon offshore waters. So they split it up into different sections too.
Yeah,
I think
which is
my
cool.
favorite thing may have been so for photographing the black-footed albatross were definitely my favorite things to photograph because they're just large, they're very photogenic. But it might have been the South Polar skua because I wasn't sure if we were going to see those at all. And every time we saw one, it was just exciting because they had really they're this dark brown bird, but they had these nice white like markings on the wing. So I feel like every time they yelled South Polar skew, I was like, gotta get images of that because that's such a cool bird.
Yeah, for some reason I found them to be easy to get videos of, as easy as anything can be out there. So I think out of all the birds, those were the ones I probably got the best videos of, and they were the one that excited me the most as well. Although there's so many other birds out there that were so cool. I don't think there was a bird out there that I wasn't excited that we saw.
Yeah, I wish we got some better views of northern fulmar because we only actually saw a couple and it was kind of brief.
Yeah, we still
Um,
got some pictures and videos of them, but we definitely didn't have the same experience with them as we did with the other types of birds. And the one that was most numerous, I think, was the pink-footed shearwater.
yeah, which I thought sooty shearwater based on the previous pelagic would have been the most abundant, but pink-footed by far was everywhere.
Yeah.
And then fork-tailed storm petrel was fairly abundant. Leeches was a little harder to come by. And
It
then there
kind of
were,
depended. It felt like at first, when we were just getting out there, it was fork-tailed, and then we all of a sudden got into the leech's habitat.
yeah, but I think overall there were more fork-tailed. And then there were a lot of rhinoceros auklets, which was cool.
Yep, a lot of rhinos out there.
Yeah. So overall, pelagic experience was good. Would recommend it, and let us know if you've ever done one. And thanks for watching and listening to this episode of the Badgerland Birding Podcast.